In the heart of a world untouched by humanity, where the air trembled with the roars of colossal beasts and survival hinged on every heartbeat, one instinct rose above all others: the drive to protect. Picture a vast plain 10 million years ago. Herds of ancient mammals moved as one, their silhouettes cut against the amber glow of a prehistoric sun. Beneath the heavy footsteps of the giants, fragile newborns took their first trembling steps into a world that offered no mercy. But amid the brutality of nature, something remarkable stirred: compassion. Was this the first flicker of empathy in the story of life? Could care and cooperation, not merely strength and aggression, have been the secret weapons that allowed life to endure? For decades, scientists believed that survival was a solitary endeavor, that each creature fought only for itself. Yet fossils whisper a different truth. In the frozen layers of time, we find evidence of nurturing, parents shielding their young from predators, herds defending their injured, and entire groups surrounding the vulnerable in a protective circle of life. These ancient acts of care were not accidents. They were strategies honed by evolution, lessons written in the language of survival. The mother of a giant ground sloth would not simply abandon her offspring. She guarded it through storms and hunger, guided by instincts deeper than reason. A herd of mammoths would encircle their calves when danger approached, trumpeting warnings that echoed across the tundra. Even the earliest predators, fierce and primal, showed signs of restraint toward their young, teaching them the art of the hunt before letting them fend for themselves. Every fossilized footprint, every preserved nest, tells us that survival was not only about who was strongest, but who could care the most. Protection was evolution's quiet revolution, a hidden force shaping behavior, intelligence, and emotion long before humanity appeared. So before we journey deeper into this lost world of survival and tenderness, ask yourself, could the origins of our empathy, our need to protect, to nurture, to love, be far older than we ever imagined? If you're as fascinated by this ancient story of life as we are, leave a like to help this project grow and share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think primitive creatures first learned to care? Your curiosity fuels our next discovery. The prehistoric Earth was a stage of extremes. Oceans boiled under volcanic skies, and continents trembled beneath the march of titans. Life, fragile yet unyielding, fought for a place amid chaos. Every sunrise was a gamble, every night a struggle for warmth and safety. The creatures of this world were not just survivors, they were pioneers, carving existence from a planet still learning to breathe. Imagine an ancient savanna blanketed in thick mist. In the distance, a saber-toothed predator stalks silently, its elongated fangs glinting in the half-light. Herds of massive herbivores shuffle nervously, their young pressed between the legs of adults. A single mistake, a misstep, a moment of distraction, meant death. In this realm, there was no room for weakness, but weakness, paradoxically, forced evolution to adapt. For the first time, survival was no longer only an individual's burden. Cooperation began to shape destiny. When storms swept through the plains or predators lurked in the dark, the creatures that stayed together, that learned to defend, warn, or share, endured longer. The seeds of empathy were sown not from peace, but from terror. The fossil record paints this in fragments: clustered nests preserved in volcanic ash, fossilized footprints of herds moving in formation, and remains of young creatures protected beneath the bodies of adults. Each piece reveals an ancient pattern, an understanding that safety was born from unity. The world was cruel, but it was also a teacher. Every drought, every hunt, every desperate migration across an unforgiving landscape refined the instinct to protect. Over time, that instinct transformed from reaction to ritual, a code of survival written not in words, but in behavior passed down through generations. Here, in the harshest corners of prehistory, life discovered that to endure, one had to do more than fight. One had to care, not out of kindness, but necessity. Yet in that necessity, a spark ignited, one that would, millions of years later, become the heart of all civilization. In the quiet layers of stone that cradle Earth's ancient past, there are moments frozen in time, silent testimonies of life, death, and something more profound: care. When paleontologists peel back the Earth, they do not just uncover bones. They uncover behavior, emotion, and the timeless struggle of living creatures to protect their own. One of the earliest clues came from a fossilized nest discovered in Mongolia's Gobi Desert. The skeleton of an oviraptor lay draped across a clutch of eggs, not as a predator, but as a guardian. For decades, scientists believed it had been stealing the eggs. Only later did the truth emerge. It had died shielding them from a sandstorm. A creature once branded a thief was, in fact, a parent, a protector caught in its final act of devotion. Elsewhere, the discovery of Psittacosaurus fossils showed something equally powerful. Dozens of young clustered around a single adult, their tiny bones preserved in a pattern suggesting protection and community. This was not random. It was behavior, evidence of care transcending instinct, an echo of affection written in stone. Even the vast world of mammals offered its own stories. Fossilized burrows from ancient species like Thrinaxodon, a small proto-mammal that lived over 200 million years ago, reveal adult and juvenile skeletons nestled together, family units sharing space, warmth, and survival. In one haunting discovery, an adult's skeleton was found curled protectively around its young, their final moments sealed beneath a volcanic ash flow. These findings shattered the long-held notion that prehistoric creatures were driven only by hunger and fear. They revealed a subtler force, the drive to nurture. This wasn't sentimentality, it was strategy. In environments of constant danger, species that invested in their offspring had better odds of passing on their genes. Every act of protection became an act of evolution. Each fossil, each trace of life entombed in rock tells us that empathy, the impulse to care for another, is not new. It is ancient, born from necessity, but transformed into something enduring. And as we continue to uncover these whispers from deep time, a question lingers. If care existed long before humans, how much of what we call emotion is truly our own? Long before the first humans learned to speak or build fires, the idea of community had already begun to take shape, not in villages or tribes, but in the animal kingdom itself. Cooperation, born from the harshness of survival, became the invisible thread that bound creatures together across millennia. Imagine the Pleistocene plains, herds of early mammals moving like living fortresses, their massive bodies shielding the young at the center. Communication was not made of words, but of movement, a glance, a sound, a shared instinct. One creature's fear became the herd's alarm. One defensive action could save dozens. This, perhaps, was the first form of society. In fossilized footprints discovered in South America, paleontologists have found traces of such unity, herds moving in synchronized patterns, adults guiding their offspring toward safety. These weren't random migrations. They were coordinated efforts, silent alliances formed through generations of adaptation. When predators approached, individuals didn't scatter. They formed ranks. Cooperation had become a weapon more powerful than teeth or claws. Even predators were not immune to this transformation. Packs of early carnivores, from dire wolves to saber-toothed cats, hunted in structured groups. They shared roles, coordinated ambushes, and distributed food, a strategy that demanded trust. Within these deadly teams, care for the weak and wounded became not just compassion, but calculation. Every member mattered to the success of the hunt. For the first time in Earth's story, survival depended on relationships. The line between instinct and emotion blurred. Acts of loyalty and sacrifice, once rare, became the foundations of endurance. Through cooperation, species learned something profound, that strength was no longer a solitary pursuit. It was collective. And perhaps that realization marked the dawn of something much greater, the first spark of social intelligence. From the nesting colonies of dinosaurs to the protective herds of mammoths, life was no longer just living. It was sharing existence. What do you think? Could these ancient alliances be the roots of the empathy and cooperation that define us today? Leave a comment below and share your perspective. Your thoughts might uncover another layer of this extraordinary story. Across the frozen landscapes of the Ice Age, colossal figures roamed: mammoths, giant ground sloths, glyptodonts, and saber-toothed predators. These were creatures shaped by extremes, and yet, beneath their immense power, another force quietly governed their survival: the maternal instinct. A mother mammoth was more than a guardian. She was the heart of her herd. In the bitter cold, she led the group to hidden water sources, remembered ancient migration routes, and shielded her calf beneath her massive frame during blizzards. Her memory, not her tusks, was her most potent weapon. Scientists studying fossilized herds have found patterns in which juveniles consistently walked beside females, suggesting a social structure centered on maternal leadership. The bond between mother and offspring was not a choice. It was the very blueprint of endurance. This maternal drive was not unique to mammoths. The giant ground sloth, slow and vulnerable when young, depended entirely on the guidance of its mother. Fossilized trackways show pairs, a large adult and a smaller individual, moving side by side, step for step, across ancient riverbeds. It's a frozen scene of mentorship, a prehistoric lesson in survival passed down in silence. Even the mighty predators displayed this hidden tenderness. Saber-toothed cats, once imagined as ruthless killers, left behind evidence of care that challenges that image. Skeletons found in the La Brea tar pits show individuals who survived severe injuries that would have been fatal had they been left alone. This suggests that members of their pack provided food and protection, ensuring the wounded lived to see another hunt. What unites these stories is a simple truth. Power alone was never enough. The species that endured were those that learned to protect the helpless, to invest time and energy into the next generation. Maternal care, and in some cases, group care, became nature's most refined adaptation. Through these acts of devotion, the giants of the past taught a lesson that echoes through time. The world may have been brutal, but in the face of that brutality, compassion emerged, quiet, instinctive, and profoundly transformative. And just as mammoths once guarded their calves beneath glacial skies, other ancient creatures, even the fiercest of the dinosaurs, would soon reveal that the instinct to protect extended far beyond mammals. For decades, dinosaurs were painted as cold, emotionless beasts, creatures driven only by hunger and instinct. Yet as paleontology advanced, a different portrait began to emerge, one that revealed unexpected warmth in the shadow of their towering forms. The enigma of dinosaur parenting reshaped not only our understanding of these ancient reptiles, but also the story of life itself. The first clues came from a barren stretch of rock in Montana known as the Egg Mountain. There, paleontologists uncovered entire nesting grounds belonging to Maiasaura, a duck-billed dinosaur whose name means good mother lizard. Fossilized nests revealed orderly arrangements of eggs, evidence of repeated use of nesting sites, and young individuals that remained in the nest long after hatching. These findings suggested attentive care, mothers returning to feed and protect their offspring until they were strong, enough to leave. But Maiasaura was not alone. Fossil evidence from species like Oviraptor, once misjudged as an egg thief, showed adults positioned protectively over clutches, their forelimbs spread in a posture strikingly similar to modern birds incubating eggs. These discoveries forced scientists to reconsider what dinosaur behavior truly looked like. The line between reptilian detachment and avian devotion began to blur. Further discoveries added more depth to this evolving picture. In Mongolia and China, paleontologists uncovered trackways of herds containing juveniles walking among adults, coordinated movements that hinted at family groups or communal rearing. Some species even built nesting colonies, where dozens of adults laid eggs close together, suggesting cooperation and shared vigilance against predators. It's a humbling realization. Creatures once thought incapable of tenderness may have shaped the earliest chapters of nurturing behavior on Earth. Their parenting was not emotional in the human sense, but strategic, a biological investment ensuring that their lineage would survive in a perilous world. Even in extinction, they left behind lessons etched in stone, that strength can coexist with care, and that the instinct to protect is far older than we ever dared imagine. And as the age of dinosaurs drew to an end, giving rise to the reign of mammals, this same ancient instinct, refined, tested, and inherited, would take on new forms in the creatures that followed. Among the most profound forces that shaped prehistoric life was not strength nor speed, but learning. The ability to observe, to imitate, and to pass knowledge from one generation to the next turned survival into something more than instinct. It became tradition. Across the eons, this quiet inheritance connected the smallest mammals, the fiercest predators, and eventually, the first humans. Picture a young saber-toothed cub, its amber eyes locked on its mother, as she stalks a giant sloth. Every step, every pause, every twitch of her tail is a lesson. She strikes, precise, efficient, and when the hunt ends, the cub approaches, mimicking her movements. No words, no instruction, just observation, repetition, and survival written into muscle memory. This is how knowledge first traveled through time. Fossilized trackways of ancient predators and herbivores alike reveal patterns that suggest teaching behaviors. Juveniles walked in deliberate formation behind adults, their smaller prints overlapping the larger ones, as though rehearsing the steps of migration, hunting, or escape. These were lessons in motion, education through experience. Even social mammals of the Ice Age displayed evidence of learning beyond instinct. Young mammoths mimicked the movements of matriarchs who remembered ancient routes to watering holes. Early canids, ancestors of wolves, learned to coordinate hunts through observation and shared practice. Learning was not a privilege, it was a lifeline. What makes this so astonishing is that the act of teaching required empathy. To teach, a creature must recognize that another does not yet know, and care enough to guide it. That single spark of understanding marked a turning point in the history of life. It was the beginning of communication, culture, and the cooperative intelligence that would one day define humanity. From dinosaur herds to early primates, these first teachers shaped more than their offspring's survival. They shaped the evolution of behavior itself. Each shared lesson rippled forward, linking generations through time. So, what do you think? Can learning and teaching in the animal kingdom be considered the roots of what we call culture today? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your insight might be another step in understanding how knowledge truly began. When the last of the great reptiles vanished and the world grew quieter, forests reclaimed the earth. In the canopies of those ancient jungles, another kind of creature began to emerge, smaller, cleverer, and far more social. These were the first primates, and with them came something the planet had never seen before: emotion with memory. In this new green world, survival no longer depended on size or strength, but on connection. Early primates formed tight-knit groups, where grooming, play, and protection became the glue that held their fragile societies together. Fossil evidence, from the shape of their hands to the structure of their skulls, tells us that these creatures were evolving not only physically, but cognitively. Their growing brains suggested the rise of empathy, recognition, and social awareness. Imagine a mother Oedipus, one of the earliest known primates, cradling her infant high among the branches, her movements deliberate and tender. A fall could mean death, but her arms, evolved for grasping, were built for care. Below, others watched and learned, their eyes reflecting understanding, curiosity, perhaps even affection. As primate groups expanded, so did their emotional worlds. Bonds between individuals became vital to survival. They mourned the loss of their young, defended one another from predators, and shared food within their groups. This was the dawn of attachment, not just instinctual, but emotional. Even fossilized remains hint at these early connections. In several primate species, healed fractures and dental wear patterns suggest that injured individuals were fed and protected by their peers. Compassion had taken root, not as a luxury, but as a strategy for life. Those who formed bonds lived longer. Those who cared endured. These early primates carried forward the lessons of the giants and the dinosaurs. That care was power, and unity was survival. Yet they added something new: awareness, the recognition of self and other, the capacity to feel not just for, but with another. It was in their expressive faces, in the spark of shared gazes, that the first glimpse of human emotion appeared. From these ancient forests, our story, the story of empathy, love, and loss, began to unfold. And as the ages shifted and new species rose, these emotional threads would weave the foundation of the first true societies, a step closer to the humanity we know today. As the Ice Age waned and the forests gave way to open plains, the lessons learned across millions of years converged in one lineage: the ancestors of humanity. What began as instinctive cooperation among early mammals and emotional bonding among primates evolved into something far greater: culture. The story of life was no longer written solely in genes, but in memory, imitation, and shared experience. Picture a small group of early hominins gathered around a dying fire. The youngest watches as an elder shapes a sharp edge from a stone, sparks glinting in the dusk. There is no spoken language yet, but understanding passes through gesture and repetition. For the first time, knowledge transcends the individual. It becomes collective, an inheritance carried not in the body, but in the mind. This moment, simple and silent, marks the turning point between animal instinct and human intention. The behaviors that once ensured survival now gave rise to communication, ritual, and identity. Cooperation became not just a strategy, but a choice, rooted in empathy and memory. Archaeological evidence supports this transformation. Early tools found at sites like Olduvai Gorge and Dmanisi show that craftsmanship improved over generations, a clear sign of teaching and refinement. Groups began to coordinate hunts, care for the elderly, and bury their dead. Actions that spoke of meaning, not mere survival. Through these acts, a new kind of inheritance emerged: cultural memory. It allowed ideas to persist beyond a single lifetime. Fire-making, tool use, and group defense evolved into symbols of unity. the first expressions of what would later become society. The same protective instincts that guided mammoth mothers and dinosaur guardians now shaped human morality. Compassion was no longer just evolutionary advantage. It became a foundation for ethics, cooperation, and civilization itself. And so, from the whispers of ancient herds to the shared silence of early human tribes, a single truth endured, that life's greatest strength has never been isolation, but connection. Each step, each act of care, each lesson shared, carried us closer to what we would one day call humanity. Across millions of years, from the nesting plains of the dinosaurs to the frozen steppes of the Ice Age, one instinct has endured: the will to protect. It is a force older than love, deeper than language, and it shaped the destiny of every creature that ever cared for another. Every fossilized nest, every preserved herd, every trace of a mother shielding her young speaks the same truth. Survival was never a solitary act. The story of life is, at its core, a story of guardianship. The oviraptor that gave its life defending its eggs, the mammoth that circled its calf against a storm, the early primate that cradled its infant among the branches, all carried within them the same ancient code. Through them, care became evolution's greatest weapon. And when humanity appeared, it did not invent compassion. It inherited it. The instinct to protect became the foundation for empathy, cooperation, and culture. We built families, tribes, and civilizations upon a behavior that had been written into life's DNA long before we had words to describe it. Even now, that legacy remains. We protect our children, our homes, and one another. We grieve the loss of others, we heal the wounded, and we reach out, driven by an impulse that connects us to the creatures that came before. Beneath the noise of modern life, that ancient rhythm still beats, the pulse of care that once echoed through prehistoric plains and forests. Perhaps this is the greatest inheritance of all, not tools or intelligence, but empathy. The quiet recognition that our strength has always come from unity, not isolation. That to endure is to care. If this journey through life's ancient story inspired you, share your thoughts in the comments. How do you see the protective instinct shaping humanity today? And if you'd like to keep exploring the hidden emotions and behaviors of the prehistoric world, subscribe and join us in uncovering the next forgotten chapter of life on Earth.